I have not seen one good argument against the rent freeze in New York City.
Is rent control bad? Hi guys, today I will try to explain why overall, at least from an economic perspective, rent controls often do more harm than good. Here I will use a very simplified example, not a research-based explanation. If you want that, you can find other videos. For example, I think Quick Thoughts recently made one where he uses a study on rent control. So with that out of the way, let's start. A very simplified example. Imagine we live in a city with 1,000 landlords, 1,000 potential tenants, and 1,000 apartments to rent. In a free market where supply and demand decide the price, rent sits between 400 and 900 euros. The basic rules of supply and demand are simple. Higher demand, higher price. Lower demand, lower price. But higher supply, lower price, lower supply, higher price. So far so good, right? Basic economics. Now imagine our city gets hit with an inflationary shock. Certain costs go up and landlords start to charge more. So rent now sits between 500 and 1,000 euros. Potential tenants start to worry. They tighten their belts, cut expenses, save where they can. But eventually, they come around. At this point, we have 1,000 landlords with 1,000 apartments. 500 above 750 euros, 500 below. And 1,000 potential tenants. 500 poorer tenants who can only afford rent below 750 euros, and 500 richer tenants who can afford rent above 750 euros. Suddenly, a mayor, looking to turn the inflationary shock into a political opportunity, steps up and says, "Don't worry, we are going to protect the poor citizens from those evil landlords. Rent can't go above 750 euros. And that's it. It's illegal now." So what happens? To understand it, we need to look at the incentives this creates for both landlords and tenants. First, landlords. The ones charging above 750 now have to think, does it even make sense to rent it out for less than the market price? For some, sure, it still does. But others decide to sell the apartment, repurpose it, or just keep it as a second home instead. Either way, 250 landlords leave the market. Supply drops. Now we have 1,000 potential tenants chasing only 750 apartments. The landlords charging between 500 and 750 are generally happy. Before, they had 500 tenants looking at their apartments. Now, all 1,000 do. Higher demand, higher prices. Rent among them climbs to now sit between 600 and 750 euros. Now, let's look at the tenants. The rich ones, the ones ready to pay above 750, are generally happy too, because now they can get apartments for less than they expected to pay. And since they are richer, they usually have better jobs, better credit score, better payment history, so landlords pick them first. All 500 of them land apartments for cheaper than they were willing to pay. That leaves 250 apartments for 500 remaining tenants. All of them people who could only afford rent under 750 euros a month. Of those 500, 100 could only afford rent between 500 and 600 euros. Since the cheapest apartment left now starts at 600 euros, they simply can't afford anything. They have to leave the city, move in with the family, or find some other way. The other 400 potential tenants fight over the 250 apartments, and 150 of them still end up with nothing. So what do we have in the end? Who did rent control actually benefit? Well, the lucky tenants who landed a rent-controlled unit, especially the richer ones who would have paid more otherwise. And the politicians, especially the mayor, who gets the reputation for protecting the poor and standing up to evil landlords. Who did it harm? Pretty much everybody else, but especially the poorer tenants. 250 landlords left the market entirely, and the 250 who stayed ended up earning less than they could have. 250 poorer tenants could no longer find or afford an apartment. So yes, from a social standpoint, rent control may sound compassionate, but in reality, it often reduces supply, increases competition, benefits the lucky insiders, and hurts the poor outsiders. That is the problem. As economists like to say, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Rent control does not magically make housing affordable. Very often, it just makes housing harder to find.